In the twilight of a forgotten realm, the sky burned in hues of deep purple and red, as if the heavens themselves were ignited by a secret passion. Under the shimmering glow of countless fairy lights, delicately strung along the ancient arches of a grand pack house, the stage was set for a night that promised both wonder and woe. Tonight, the Silver Dawn pack gathered in the vast courtyard, a space that seemed to breathe with the collective anticipation of generations, preparing for a sacred mating ceremony that held the power to reshape destinies. From the very first heartbeat of the evening, an electric undercurrent of mystery rippled through the air. Every whispered word and every furtive glance among the assembled were laden with a sense of impending change. This was not merely a celebration of union, it was a turning point where tradition, fate, and desire collided in a dance as old as time. As the last golden rays of the setting sun faded, the entire space transformed into a surreal tapestry of light and shadow, a realm where every detail, from the meticulously arranged rows of chairs to the delicate trails of rose petals scattered along the aisle, spoke of a world steeped in both ritual and raw emotion. Amidst this orchestrated splendor, one figure moved quietly at the edge of the gathering, a solitary silhouette against the vibrant backdrop. Isidora, the unassuming younger sister of the illustrious Lysandra, stood apart with a delicate grace that belied the storm raging within her. Though her beauty was undeniable, a soft, almost ethereal quality that many admired, Isidora's eyes held a quiet sorrow and an inner isolation. While others basked in the spotlight of the impending celebration, she remained an enigma, hidden in plain sight, caught between the roles of a supportive kin and a reluctant witness to a fate not of her choosing. In that moment, as the gentle murmur of excited voices filled the air and the laughter of old friends mingled with the rustle of ceremonial fabrics, a subtle but powerful tension gripped the heart of the night. Every detail of the scene, from the gentle sway of the fairy lights to the crisp rustle of silk and lace, hinted at an unspoken narrative of passion, betrayal, and destiny. It was as if the entire universe had conspired to hold its breath, waiting for an unseen catalyst to disrupt the carefully woven tapestry of tradition. At the heart of this nocturnal spectacle, the Silver Dawn Pack's ancient customs wove together, the fates of all who attended. The old and revered traditions, passed down through countless moons, dictated that tonight would mark the beginning of a new era, a union that promised not only to merge two powerful families, but also to solidify alliances that had spanned generations. Yet beneath this facade of unity, whispers of uncertainty and foreboding began to stir. There was an unspoken acknowledgement among the elders that destiny, capricious and unyielding, often favored the unexpected, the mysterious, and the misunderstood. Isidora's mind, ever restless and reflective, was a battleground of conflicting emotions. On one hand, there lay a deep-seated longing to remain invisible, to let her sister's brilliance overshadow her own quiet existence. On the other, a hidden ember of defiance began to glow, a spark born from years of playing the background, of sacrificing her own desires for the sake of a family narrative that had long been written without her in mind. It was this internal struggle, a silent war waged within the confines of her heart, that set the stage for the events about to unfold. The ambient light, soft and mysterious, seemed to mirror Isidora's inner turmoil. Every beam of light and every creeping shadow danced in unison with her heartbeat, amplifying her isolation and the weight of an unwanted destiny. The pack's ancient rituals, though celebrated by many, now took on an eerie, almost spectral quality, a reminder that even the most hallowed traditions could harbor unexpected twists. In the midst of this grand ceremony, where every moment was charged with both beauty and foreboding, the fate of one soul hung delicately in balance. As the ceremony's final preparations neared completion, the palpable anticipation in the air deepened into a silence that was both comforting and unnerving. The soft hum of murmurs and the occasional clink of ceremonial glassware faded into a distant echo, leaving only the steady rhythm of hearts pounding in unison with the unfolding drama. The stage was now perfectly set for a revelation that would challenged not only the established order of the. This night, bathed in the mystique of fading light and rising shadows, was more than a simple celebration. It was a crucible where the characters of old legends would be remade. The delicate interplay of hope and despair, of silent rebellion and enforced duty, hinted at secrets yet to be uncovered and battles yet to be fought. In this charged atmosphere, every detail, every fleeting glance, held the promise of a story that was as intricate as it was inevitable. A narrative where the lines between love and duty, fate and free will, were destined to blur in the most unexpected ways. Thus began a night of whispered promises and unspoken conflicts. A night when the ordinary transformed into the extraordinary, when a quiet observer might just become the catalyst for an epic, life-altering metamorphosis. And as the shadows lengthened and the first star of the evening twinkled into existence, the true tale of the Silver Dawn Pack was poised on the edge of revelation, inviting all who listened to step closer into its enigmatic embrace. Under the luminous glow of the enchanted night, the pack's fabled characters emerged like figures from an ancient legend, each with a story etched in both grace and conflict. At the forefront was Lysandra, the illustrious scion of the Bloodrose family. With her every step, she exuded an aura of radiance and power, a beacon that drew admiration from every corner of the grand courtyard. Her presence was magnetic, a harmonious blend of regal poise and warrior spirit that left no heart untouched. Lysandra's eyes, shimmering like twin orbs of determination, seemed to capture both the brilliance of a sunrise and the fierce intensity of a storm. Clad in garments that hinted at both elegance and battle readiness, she moved with a fluid grace that spoke of countless victories and the promise of even greater triumphs. To many in the pack, she was not merely a daughter of an esteemed lineage. She was the very embodiment of hope and strength, the jewel that illuminated the legacy of the Bloodrose family. In stark contrast, yet complementing the celestial glow, of Lysandra stood Darius, the alpha whose very presence commanded respect and awe. Darius was a towering figure, his broad shoulders and sculpted physique speaking silently of years of rigorous training and an unyielding commitment to leadership. There was a quiet authority in his every gesture, a profound intensity in his gaze that could silence even the most boisterous of voices. His dark, carefully styled hair framed a chiseled face, and his piercing gray eyes, sharp and analytical, seemed to read the souls of those around him. Darius was a man of few words, yet when he spoke, his voice resonated with the calm certainty of a seasoned leader, the kind whose decisions were as measured as they were resolute. In him, the ancient traditions of the pack found a living, breathing manifestation. He was the unyielding rock upon which the future of the Silver Dawn Pack would be built. Amid these towering figures, almost hidden in their resplendence, was Isidora, the quieter, often overlooked younger sister. While Lysandra shone brightly under the public gaze, Isidora moved through the shadows with an almost ethereal subtlety, her presence gentle, yet profound. There was an undeniable wistfulness in her eyes, a silent yearning for recognition that belied her calm exterior. Though her beauty was understated, a soft luminescence that many admired in hushed tones, Isidora's heart harbored a deep-seated detachment, a reluctance to step into the glaring spotlight that so effortlessly embraced her sister. Behind her reserved demeanor, however, lay a tumult of hidden longing and unspoken dreams. She had spent her life as the supportive echo in the background, content to watch her sister's brilliance from afar, yet an inner voice whispered of a destiny uniquely her own, a destiny that demanded both courage and a willingness to challenge the status quo. Completing this triad of influential figures was Pippa, a gentle yet steadfast presence among the pack's intricate social tapestry. As one of the few Omegas whose quiet resilience belied an inner strength, Pippa possessed an empathetic nature that often set her apart. Her concern for Isidora was evident in every tender glance and whispered word, a silent vow to ensure that even the most overlooked souls were never left to face the world alone. Pippa's supportive role, coupled with her innate ability to sense the undercurrents of emotion, made her both a confidant and a subtle instigator. Alongside these primary characters, the loyal servants and numerous supporting pack members played their part in the grand unfolding of fate. They moved with a purpose born of tradition and duty, swift, silent, and ever watchful. Their presence, though less pronounced than the central figures, added layers of complexity to the narrative. In every discreet exchange and every fleeting glance, there lay hints of long-standing rivalries, secret alliances, and the simmering potential for conflict. The loyal servants, in particular, were the silent custodians of the pack's ancient customs, their actions often speaking louder than any formal proclamation. They served not merely as attendants, but as the living threads that bound the fabric of the pack together, ensuring that every ritual, every celebration, resonated with the weight of history and the promise of continuity. In this meticulously crafted mosaic of destinies, each character carried their own burden and hope, a tapestry woven with threads of light and shadow. Lysandra's dazzling confidence and celebrated lineage, Darius's imposing authority and measured resolve, and Isidora's quiet yet potent inner world combined to create a narrative that was as timeless as it was immediate. Their lives, intertwined by blood, duty, and the unpredictable hand of fate, set the stage for a night that would change everything. The interplay of admiration, rivalry, and hidden aspirations among these key figures hinted at conflicts yet to come, casting a long, mysterious shadow over the celebration. Together, they embodied the very essence of the Silver Dawn Pack, an assembly of souls bound by ancient rites, challenged by evolving destinies, and driven by the relentless pursuit of honor and identity. In the light of the fading day, as the stars began to peek through the twilight, the stage was set for revelations that would stir hearts, ignite passions, and forever alter the course of their intertwined lives. Anticipation and Isidora's internal world. The courtyard shimmered beneath the glow of fairy lights and torchfire, every surface touched by a golden warmth that made the celebration feel otherworldly. Laughter floated on the air like falling petals, and everywhere she looked, Isidora saw beauty, curated, rehearsed, perfect. And yet, in the middle of all that light, she felt like a shadow. She stood near the edge of the gathering, half concealed by a sweeping arch of greenery threaded with white blossoms. It wasn't intentional. She hadn't consciously sought out the corner of the space, but she found herself there, like she always did, just outside the center, quietly watching her sister steal the room. Lysandra moved like she owned the world. She wore confidence like a second skin, a quiet smirk on her lips, and a gleam in her eyes that made even seasoned warriors lean in. Her gown shimmered with each movement, the embroidery catching the light like tiny stars. Even the way she adjusted her hair, a simple flick of her fingers, commanded attention. Isidora couldn't look away. Her breath caught as she watched Darius arrive, flanked by guards, his gaze sharp and unreadable. When he crossed the courtyard and took Lysandra's hand, the air shifted. A new electricity bloomed, one of legacy, of union, of power being formally sealed. The pack murmured their approval, and for a moment, Isidora let herself imagine that they were applauding her. Then she caught her reflection in a window. Pale blue gown, hair in soft braids, no jewels, no spotlight. Just her. And the illusion broke. She looked down quickly, pretending to fuss with a tray of refreshments she wasn't even supposed to be carrying. The servants gave her gentle nods, not out of deference, but of familiarity. She blended in with them far too easily. Wasn't that Isidora wanted to be her sister? At least, that's what she told herself. She didn't crave the constant attention, the expectation to shine, the weight of always being the one. But standing here, watching her parents adjust Lysandra's ceremonial train with trembling hands, she felt the ache of something else. Not envy, exactly, but a yearning to matter, to be seen. What would it feel like, she wondered, to have her mother look at her like she was the center of the universe? She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath until it escaped her in a silent sigh. Around her, the crowd was growing. Betas, warriors, elders, even pups in formal dress, all pressing in to glimpse the spectacle of the century. Tonight's ceremony would seal a bond that would shape the fate of the pack. And she, Isidora, was merely a spectator. She felt a flutter of guilt for even thinking it. Lysandra had worked hard, trained harder, and never faltered. She had earned this. Isidora had always told herself that her place was to support, to serve quietly, to keep peace within the chaos of a powerful family. But tonight, that belief felt thinner, more fragile than before. Was she truly content with fading into the background? As the breeze lifted her braid, she caught the scent of jasmine from the garlands. It reminded her of summer nights as a child, running barefoot through the training fields while her sister practiced sword forms. Isidora had always watched from the sidelines, a book in her hands and dirt on her skirt. Her father used to joke that she was born to think, not fight. Back then, she had believed that was enough. Now she wasn't so sure. Across the crowd, she saw Pippa making her way toward her with a soft smile. Her friend's presence was always a balm, gentle, grounding, never expectant. Isidora straightened slightly, offering a faint smile in return. "You doing okay?" Pippa whispered when she reached her. Isidora nodded, though the motion felt heavy. "It's Lysandra's night," she said, trying to make the words sound celebratory instead of rehearsed. "Yes," Pippa replied carefully, her eyes scanning Isidora's face. "But that doesn't mean you disappear." The words struck. Something deep. An old bruise, maybe. Isidora wanted to believe them. But how could she? In a world where greatness had already been claimed by someone else, where her family's legacy had been draped over her sister's shoulders like a crown. What was left for her? The breeze picked up again, carrying with it laughter, celebration, and a strange sense of distance. She wrapped her arms around herself, as if the night had suddenly turned cold. As the ceremony crept closer, the energy in the air thickened with anticipation. And in that moment, standing on the fringe, heart tight and eyes stinging with emotions she couldn't quite name, Isidora wondered. Was this all she'd ever be, an afterthought in her own life? Or had the moon goddess, in her infinite mystery, carved out a place for her that no one, not even she, could yet see? She swallowed hard and kept watching. As the soft glow of twilight deepened, a palpable shift stirred the air. The murmurs of the gathered pack hushed into an expectant silence as a commanding figure emerged at the threshold of the courtyard. Darius had arrived, flanked by his loyal beta, Milo, whose steady presence mirrored his alpha's unwavering resolve. Darius stepped forward with an aura that seemed to absorb every stray ray of fading light. His approach was measured and deliberate, each step resonating with the echoes of a legacy forged in countless battles and hardened by the weight of responsibility. In that instant, the entire atmosphere transformed. What had been a gentle cadence of anticipation now pulsed with an undercurrent of raw, imminent power. Darius was a vision of restrained majesty. His dark hair was impeccably styled, the sides closely cropped to reveal the strength of his features, while a longer, artfully tousled top lent him an air of effortless authority. His eyes, a piercing shade of gray, swept over the assembly with a scrutiny that could both comfort and unsettle. There was something almost hypnotic in the way those eyes observed everything around him, like twin beacons of determination set against a backdrop of uncertainty. For a heartbeat, as he crossed the courtyard, time itself seemed to slow. At that charged moment, his gaze locked onto Isidora's. It was not merely a glance. It was as if Darius had seen through the layers of reserve and quiet longing that she had so carefully hidden. In his eyes, she glimpsed a flash of something profound, recognition, and perhaps even a hint of destiny. The connection was electric, a collision of fates that reverberated silently among the onlookers. For Isidora, who had long dwelled in the periphery, that moment felt like an irrevocable crossing of paths, an unspoken promise that something was about to change. Around them, the pack seemed to collectively inhale, every member sensing that the course of the evening was about to be irrevocably altered. Milo, standing steadfast by Darius's side, observed the unfolding scene with a calm intensity, his presence underscoring the gravity of the occasion. Together, they embodied both the tradition of the pack. As Darius drew nearer to the center of the ceremonial space, the ambient glow of the fairy lights deepened into a radiant halo, framing him in an almost celestial luminescence. The meticulously arranged decor, the delicate drapes of green vines, the orderly rows of chairs, the scattered petals, seemed to pause, holding their breath in reverence of the unfolding climax. Every detail of the evening, every silent whisper and flickering shadow, was attuned to the magnetism of this defining moment. The tension was almost unbearable, thickening the air into a tangible force that pressed upon the hearts of those present. Whispers of anticipation fluttered like moths around a flame as members of the pack exchanged nervous glances. They knew that tonight, destiny was about to inscribe its mark, a sign that would forever bind the lives of those involved. And in that suspended instant, all eyes turned toward Darius as he reached out, his hand steady, his expression one of solemn intent. In that decisive gesture, the first spark of the ceremonial mark began to glimmer on the back of Isidora's hand, a faint luminous pattern that seemed to have been etched by the very will of the moon goddess. The mark shivered to life, a subtle yet irrevocable emblem that signified a bond meant to alter destinies. For a moment, the world around her blurred into insignificance, and all that mattered was the electrifying jolt that surged between them. Isidora felt it deep within her, a visceral connection that transcended words, as if her very soul was being tethered to Darius's. Darius's eyes, usually so guarded and measured, betrayed a fleeting glimpse of awe and determination. In that charged moment, his silent acknowledgement of the mark carried the weight of ancient prophecies and the promise of a future rewritten. His gaze, full of conflicting emotions, authority mingled with unexpected tenderness, spoke volumes to the silent witnesses scattered around the courtyard. Every observer, from the eldest elder to the youngest initiate, sensed that the balance of fate had shifted, that a new chapter had been inscribed on the tapestry of the pack's legacy. The air vibrated with the anticipation of what was to come. The ceremonial mark, now glowing softly on Isidora's hand, was more than a simple sign. It was an indelible declaration of fate, a promise sealed by the divine, and a harbinger of transformation that would echo through the corridors of the pack's history. It was a symbol both beautiful and foreboding, carrying with it the burden of destiny and the hope of redemption, or perhaps the threat of upheaval. In that breathtaking crescendo of the ceremony, as the echoes of Darius's presence mingled with the stirring hearts of the pack, the future seemed poised on the brink of revelation. Every detail, every heartbeat, was a prelude to the unfolding drama that would forever change the lives of those entwined by the sacred bond. The night, with all its luminous beauty and underlying tension, had become a silent witness to a turning point, a moment when fate, desire, and destiny converged in a spark of transcendent clarity. In a heartbeat, the air shifted and time seemed to freeze. As Darius stepped closer, his hand, steady and deliberate, reached out across the murmuring crowd. Isidora's world narrowed to that single impossible moment, the cool touch of his fingers, the unexpected invitation that bridged the gap between her isolation and the fate the pack had long revered. Her pulse thundered in her ears as his hand gently clasped hers, and in that instant, An electric surge shot through her like lightning. It was as if a current, charged with ancient power and divine will, had coursed along her arm, awakening every nerve ending with an intensity that both exhilarated and terrified her. The first sign of transformation began on the back of her hand. Under Darius's unwavering gaze, a luminous pattern materialized, a delicate network of silver lines that glowed softly, as if etched by moonlight itself. The intricate design unfurled slowly, like silver vines creeping along her skin, mapping out an indelible bond that defied all logic and reason. The mark pulsed in tandem with her racing heart, each beat a silent confirmation that destiny had chosen her in a twist of fate that no one could have foreseen. Around them, the atmosphere became charged with a mix of wonder and apprehension. A collective gasp rippled through the assembled pack as eyes widened in disbelief. The ceremonial setting, already steeped in mystique and tradition, now shimmered with an additional layer of surreal magic. Every member of the pack, from the sagacious elders to the young pups, whose wide eyes darted with equal parts curiosity and fear, watched as the bond. Isidora's own reaction was a tempest of emotions. For a moment, she felt as though she were caught in a vortex of conflicting sensations: awe at the divine spectacle unfolding on her skin, horror at the irreversible twist of fate, and disbelief that she, so often relegated to the shadows, was now the center of an ancient and powerful destiny. The silver mark, delicate yet unyielding, shone like a beacon of both promise and burden. It was a symbol that spoke to the pack's deepest beliefs, a tangible manifestation of a force greater than any one individual, a reminder that the moon goddess's will was as mysterious as it was absolute. As the glowing pattern took shape, the murmurs among the crowd swelled into a cacophony of reactions. Some pack members exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions a blend of reverence and trepidation, as if they were witnessing a miracle laced with a hidden curse. Others, caught in the grip of superstition, whispered that this was a sign from the divine, a message that fate had been rewritten in that very moment. Yet still, a few hardened faces betrayed an undercurrent of resentment and disbelief, as though the sacred tradition was being defiled by an unforeseen twist. Isidora's mind raced with unspoken questions. What did this mean for her? How could the mark, so sudden and unanticipated, disrupt the carefully laid plans of generations? Each question battled with another in the confines of her thoughts, mingling with the rush of adrenaline that still thrummed in her veins. The weight of familial expectations and the cold logic of destiny crashed within her as she tried to reconcile the luminous design on her skin with the person she had always believed herself to be: quiet, unremarkable, and destined to remain unseen. For Darius, the scene was no less overwhelming. His normally impenetrable expression softened ever so slightly as he surveyed the mark, a silent acknowledgement of its profound significance reflecting in his eyes. There was a fleeting vulnerability in his gaze, a rare crack in the stoic facade of an alpha, that spoke of the heavy cost of leadership and the unforeseen consequences of a bond forged by forces beyond mortal control. His grip on Isidora's hand tightened momentarily, as if to ensure that she, too, felt the weight of what was happening. In that suspended instant, the world seemed to hold its breath. The radiant pattern on Isidora's hand was not merely an emblem. It was a declaration, a binding covenant between her and the Alpha, a signal to the gods and the pack alike that fate had chosen a new path. The interplay of light and shadow, the quiet murmur of ancient rites, and the raw surge of emotion converged to create a scene of breathtaking intensity, one that would echo through the corridors of the pack's history for years to come. As the glow of the mark dimmed slightly into a steady, pulsating shimmer, an uneasy calm settled over the gathering. The ceremony, once a harmonious celebration of unity, had taken a dramatic turn, a twist that redefined the very essence of destiny within the Silver Dawn pack. And amid that charged silence, Isidora stood trembling, her heart filled with a cocktail of fear, hope, and an unspoken resolve. She had been irrevocably changed, marked not only by divine will, but by the undeniable promise of a future that would challenge everything she had ever known. In the immediate aftermath of the ceremony, as the echo of gasps and murmurs still rippled through the gathered crowd, Isidora found herself submerged in a storm of conflicting emotions. The weight of the unexpected bond pressed down on her like an unseen hand, each pulsation of the silver mark on her skin a constant reminder that fate had chosen her in a way she never anticipated. Her heart pounded erratically, a blend of dread, disbelief, and a strange, budding curiosity about the destiny unfolding before her. At first, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts that clashed like the fiercest of storms. How could this be happening? How could she, the quiet observer, suddenly become the centerpiece of an ancient ritual that redefined everything? The sense of guilt was almost overwhelming. Guilt for having unwittingly stolen the spotlight that had always belonged to her, sister, Lysandra. Every time she recalled the radiant smile on Lysandra's face during the ceremony, a pang of remorse tightened around her chest. She had always admired her sister's brilliance, yet now that brilliance was shadowed by a twist of fate that cast her into an unexpected role. It was as if her very identity had... Around her, the reactions of her family and the pack were as varied as they were intense. In one corner, her parents, Mallory and Pierce, stood with expressions that mingled shock, sorrow, and concern. Pierce's brow was furrowed deeply, his eyes betraying a mixture of paternal disappointment and a desperate hope that things might yet be made right. Mallory, on the other hand, appeared almost overwhelmed by the unfolding drama, her delicate features marred by worry as she reached out to touch Isidora's arm, as if to ground her in a reality that suddenly seemed so alien. Their faces spoke volumes, a silent language of regret and helplessness, as they tried to reconcile the newly altered course of their family's destiny. The reaction among the pack was no less tumultuous. Some members offered sympathetic glances, their eyes filled with pity for the unexpected burden thrust upon Isidora. They whispered among themselves that the bond was a sign from the moon goddess, a divine decree that, despite its beauty, carried a heavy cost. Others, however, were far from sympathetic. Outraged murmurs arose from those who had long believed in the sanctity of tradition. For them, this twist in fate was not a blessing, but a betrayal, a disruption of the natural order that had been meticulously maintained through generations. Their whispers, laced with scorn and incredulity, grew louder as they tried to process the impossible turn of events, their anger simmering beneath a veneer of civility. Caught in the center of this maelstrom, Isidora's inner world was a battleground of emotions. There was a profound sadness at the thought of having stolen the limelight from her beloved sister, a role that had been etched in the very fabric of their family's legacy. Yet, amid that sadness, there flickered an inexplicable spark of curiosity, a mysterious pull toward the destiny now inscribed on her skin. This bond, as mystifying as it was formidable, stirred something within her that she had never felt before. Was it a call to rise above the confines of being the perennial understudy? Or was it a sign of a deeper, more intrinsic connection to a fate that transcended familial expectations? Every glance from the crowd, every whispered remark, intensified her internal struggle. The pack's eyes, laden with judgment and awe, made her feel simultaneously exposed and invisible, a paradox that gnawed at her sense of self. She longed to explain that she had not chosen this destiny, that it had been forced upon her by powers beyond mortal control. But the weight of that responsibility was crushing, a burden she now had to carry whether she wanted to or not. In the silence that followed the revelation of the mark, her mind repeatedly returned to the image of the luminous, silver pattern, a symbol both delicate and indelible, etched by divine decree. In that moment of raw vulnerability, Isidora's thoughts oscillated between a desperate wish to reclaim the normalcy of her old life and a reluctant, yet growing intrigue about the power and mystery of the bond. Could it be that this mark, this unforeseen twist of fate, was not a curse, but an untapped well of strength waiting to be discovered? As the pack's murmurs swirled around her, she realized that within the heavy cloak of guilt lay the seeds of a transformation she had never dared to imagine. Her eyes, once clouded with resignation, now shimmered with an uncertain resolve. The conflicting emotions, the guilt for having disrupted the natural order, the sorrow for the loss of what was once unchallenged, and the budding curiosity about the destiny now tethered to her, coalesced into a silent vow. Deep within, she resolved that she would not let this bond define her solely as a victim of fate. Instead, she would seek to understand its power, to harness the very energy that had upended her life, and perhaps, in doing so, forge a path that was uniquely her own. Thus, in the wake of a revelation that shattered long-held expectations, Isidora stood at the precipice of a new, daunting reality, a reality marked by pain, wonder, and the uncertain promise of a destiny that was both a blessing and a burden. And in that tumultuous moment, as her heart throbbed with the weight of unspoken questions and uncharted possibilities, she could not help but wonder, might this unexpected twist be the very catalyst? As the revelation of the mate mark rippled through the pack, a schism emerged like a fissure in ancient stone. The once unified Silver Dawn pack now found itself divided by an unforeseen decree from the moon goddess. In the immediate aftermath, whispers cascaded through the crowd. Some members, their eyes bright with reverence, celebrated the divine sign as an unmistakable blessing, a clear directive from the gods that destiny had been irrevocably altered. They nodded in silent agreement, convinced that fate had chosen its champion. For them, the luminous silver pattern was a symbol of order and sacred duty, a promise that the gods had spoken and that the natural course of leadership would be restored. Yet not all were so convinced. In darker corners of the gathering, skeptical voices murmured doubts. Eyes shifted from one to another as hushed conversations flared with uncertainty. Could this truly be the goddess's will? One pack member whispered, his tone laced with disbelief. Others exchanged knowing glances, their expressions hardening as they questioned whether the mark had been a blessing at all, or perhaps a harbinger of unforeseen chaos. The murmurs of dissent grew steadily, weaving a tapestry of division that threatened to shatter the age-old unity of the pack. Amid this swirl of conflicting opinions, Lysandra's simmering resentment could not be masked. Once the radiant star of the Bloodrose family, she now felt the sting of betrayal more acutely than ever. Her eyes, usually alight with pride and determination, burned with a cold fury that sent shivers down the spines of those who caught a glimpse. To her, the mark on Isidora's hand was not a divine gift but an injustice, a twist of fate that had stolen the limelight, the honor, and the role she had long been promised. Each whispered doubt, each approving nod from supporters of the mark, deepened her sense of loss and ignited a fierce determination to reclaim what she believed was rightfully hers. The tension between the two sisters was palpable, a silent clash of wills that resonated with every heartbeat of the pack. Lysandra's confidence, once unchallenged, now contended with the rising storm of her siblings' unexpected destiny. In the brief, strained exchanges of glances, the unspoken feud was evident. A lifetime of comparison, of living in each other's shadows, was reaching its boiling point. The air between them seemed to crackle with both latent anger and sorrow, as if every ounce of unresolved rivalry was finally converging into a single, explosive moment. Throughout the crowd, the emotional strain was equally evident. Elders wore expressions of grave concern, aware that the delicate balance of power that had governed the pack for generations was now teetering on the edge. Some faces, lined with the wisdom of many moons, betrayed deep apprehension at the potential upheaval this twist could provoke. They exchanged cautious words and furtive glances, their collective uncertainty a mirror of the shifting dynamics before them. Every member of the pack, regardless of rank, felt the weight of the decision reverberating through their very souls, as if the future of the entire lineage hung in a precarious balance. As the murmurs escalated, factions began to form almost imperceptibly among the gathered wolves. One group, fervently convinced that the goddess's decree was both sacred and immutable, rallied behind Isidora's newfound role, their loyalty to tradition unwavering even in the face of controversy. They saw the mark as a clarion call, a divine command that could not be dismissed by mere mortal dissent. Conversely, another faction, haunted by the echoes of old alliances and personal grievances, viewed the mark with skepticism. To them, it was an aberration that threatened to upend not only the established order, but also the very identity of the pack. Their hushed discussions were laden with warnings of potential disaster, of fractures that could lead to strife and bitter conflict. In the midst of these clashing viewpoints, the atmosphere in the courtyard grew increasingly charged. Every breath seemed heavy with the burden of unspoken implications. Every pause in conversation pregnant with the possibility of impending revolt. The pack, long bound by traditions that had guided them through centuries of challenges, now found itself at a crossroads. The ancient rites and the weight of destiny collided with the raw, personal ambitions of those who longed to define their own path. The result was an almost tangible tension, a force that seemed to ripple outward from the center of the gathering. As the night deepened, it became clear that this was not merely a moment of ritual. It was the beginning of a profound and inevitable transformation. The mark, glowing softly on Isidora's hand, was a symbol of a new era, one that promised both hope and strife. It was a catalyst that would force old loyalties to be questioned and new alliances to be formed. And as the pack struggled to reconcile the decree of the goddess with their own deeply held beliefs, the stage was set for an internal conflict that would echo far beyond this single, fateful evening. In that charged silence, as doubts and devotion danced in the eyes of the onlookers, the future of the Silver Dawn pack hung in the balance. A future that promised to be as turbulent as it was transformative, where the paths of destiny would be redrawn by the rising tide of internal strife and the relentless quest for power and identity. Later that night, in the quiet recesses of a dimly lit corridor, far from the eyes of the assembly, Isidora and Pippa found a moment of fragile privacy. The steady hum of the pack's lingering whispers faded into the background, leaving only the soft cadence of their hushed voices echoing against the cold stone walls. In that intimate space, tension mingled with a shared sense of foreboding, moment where secrets and destiny intertwined. Pippa's eyes, warm with concern and quiet determination, met Isidora's as she began. "Isidora, what do you think this mark means for you? For us?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried the weight of questions that had haunted both of them since the ceremony. Isidora's gaze fell to the delicate silver pattern still glowing faintly on her hand. I'm not sure," she admitted, her tone a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "It's like it's etched not just on my skin, but on my very soul. I feel its pulse every time I close my eyes." She paused, taking a shuddering breath as if gathering the strength to confront the swirling chaos within her. But what if it isn't a curse at all? What if this mark is a call? A challenge meant for me? Pippa's expression softened, though worry lingered beneath her kind eyes. A challenge or a burden? The implications are enormous, Isidora. Our entire pack, your family, now sees you in a completely different light. Some say it's destiny, while others whisper it's a mistake. But you know, deep down, you always had a quiet strength. Maybe it's time you let that shine. Isidora's heart pounded as she considered Pippa's words. For so long, she had been the quiet observer, the unremarked shadow behind her brilliant sister. Yet now, with this unexpected twist of fate, she could sense something stirring, a deep, relentless, resolve that had lain dormant for years. I've spent my life in the background, she confessed softly, watching Lysandra take center stage while I remained invisible. And now, with this mark, I feel both the sting of that loss and a strange pull toward something greater. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the internal conflict raging within her. I'm scared, Pippa. Scared of the cost, of the expectations, and of the power it might demand I wield. Pippa reached out, placing a gentle hand on Isidora's arm. It's okay to be scared, but remember, you're not defined by others' expectations or by the role you were once meant to play. This mark, this destiny, is yours to shape. You have every right to question it, to explore what it means for you. The moon goddess's will is mysterious, but it has given you a chance to step out of the shadows and into your own light. Isidora's eyes glistened as she absorbed Pippa's support. In that moment, her mind raced with visions of the future, of challenges that would test her in ways she had never imagined, of battles both within and without. I know, she murmured, and I feel it growing inside me. It's like there's a part of me that's been waiting all along for this moment, a part that isn't content with simply being the forgotten sister. I want to prove that I can stand on my own, that I can be more than just an afterthought. Her voice, though quiet, resonated with a newfound determination. Pippa smiled softly, her eyes reflecting both pride and caution. That's the spirit, Isidora. There's a fire in you that the pack can't ignore now. But remember, this isn't just about proving yourself to them. It's about proving it to you. Every step you take will come at a cost. Embracing this destiny might... Isidora's gaze shifted upward, as if seeking answers from the darkened ceiling, where flickering shadows danced like ghosts of forgotten dreams. Every choice carries a price, she whispered, and I fear what I might lose if I let this mark define me. Yet I also fear that if I don't embrace it, I'll forever be trapped in the silence of my own doubts. Her words hung in the air, heavy with the promise of transformation and the threat of irreversible change. A long, thoughtful silence followed, filled only by the soft rustle of fabric and the distant murmurs of the pack beyond their sanctuary. Pippa squeezed her hand reassuringly. Whatever comes, you're not alone in this. I'll be here, every step of the way. And maybe, just maybe, this challenge is exactly what you need to discover the strength you never knew you had. Isidora nodded slowly, the resolve in her eyes hardening like tempered steel. I'm going to face this head on, she declared softly, a quiet vow forming in the depths of her soul. I may have been the quiet, overlooked one all my life, but now I see that this bond, this destiny, is an opportunity. An opportunity to rise, to claim my own path, and to challenge everything that has been set before me. The conviction in her voice was palpable, stirring a subtle ember of rebellion that promised to ignite into something formidable. As they parted ways, the seed of rebellion was sown, a seed nurtured by whispered promises and the shared understanding of the sacrifices to come. Isidora stepped back into the corridor, with Pippa's encouraging words echoing in her heart, aware that the road ahead was fraught with peril and uncertainty. But for the first time, she felt a stirring of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, this unexpected destiny could be the catalyst for the transformation she had always longed for. And with that thought, she resolved to prepare for the challenges to come, determined to prove that she was not merely a victim of fate, but a force to be reckoned with. Darius retreated into the solitude of his private chamber, away from the watchful eyes of the pack and the relentless demands of tradition. In the quiet stillness that followed the ceremony, he found himself wrestling with a storm of emotions that clashed against the rigid expectations of his role as alpha. His mind, usually as disciplined as his battle formations, now drifted between duty and desire, a duality that threatened to unravel the very fabric of his leadership. As he sat alone beneath the muted glow of a single lantern, Darius's thoughts swirled with the echoes of the night's events. The image of Isidora's hand, now adorned with that mysterious silver mark, replayed over and over in his mind. It was as if fate had redrawn the boundaries of his destiny with a single, unexpected gesture. A gesture that not only disrupted the carefully planned union with Lysandra, but also ignited a spark within him that he could no longer ignore. He recalled the weight of every step he had taken that evening, the solemn dignity with which he had accepted the role prescribed by ancient custom. Yet beneath that calm exterior, a deep internal conflict churned. Darius had always prided himself on his unwavering adherence to the traditions of the Silver Dawn Pack. For generations, these customs had been the backbone of his people, a sacred code that ensured order and continuity. But tonight, that sacred code was challenged by an undeniable force, a connection that pulsed through him with every glance at Isidora. It was a force both foreign and familiar, stirring feelings he had long kept buried beneath the armor of duty. His heart, the very symbol of his strength, now beat with a conflicting rhythm, a steady cadence of responsibility intertwined with a wild, untamed longing. In moments of solitude, when the pack's expectations receded into a distant murmur, Darius allowed himself to ponder what it truly meant to lead. Was leadership measured solely by the unwavering application of tradition, or could it also encompass the unpredictable currents of human emotion? The thought was as dangerous as it was alluring. Gazing into the dark reflection of a polished bronze mirror, he saw not just the stoic, battle-hardened alpha, but a man caught in the throes of a profound, internal dilemma. The burdens of leadership, which had always felt like a natural extension of his identity, now pressed upon him with an unbearable intensity. Every decision, every whispered command, now carried the weight of a potential future rewritten by an unforeseen bond. How could he reconcile the expectations of his forefathers with the undeniable pull he felt toward Isidora? A pull that whispered of possibility. In the silent aftermath, Darius's thoughts turned to the legacy of the pack. The traditions that had guided him were not mere rituals. They were the very essence of his people's identity. Yet, as he struggled to adhere to these customs, he could not ignore the magnetic presence of the one who now shared his fate in a way he had never anticipated. There was a vulnerability in that realization, a truth that leadership sometimes demanded sacrifices that went beyond strategy and strength. It demanded the courage to embrace the unknown, to let go of old certainties and step into the uncertain realm of personal connection. The internal battle was fierce and relentless. On one side lay the call of tradition, a voice as ancient as the silver moon that watched over the pack, reminding him of the duty he had sworn to uphold. On the other side lay the tantalizing promise of change, the possibility that the bond he now shared with Isidora could forge a new path, one that might strengthen the pack in ways that rigid tradition had never allowed. It was a paradox of duty and desire, and Darius found himself questioning whether he could bear the consequences of straying from the well-trodden path. In these quiet moments, his introspection revealed the true cost of leadership. It was a burden that demanded not only the fortitude to enforce the rules, but also the wisdom to know when those rules needed to evolve. Darius's soul ached with the realization that he had always been taught to be unyielding, to never waver. Yet now he felt an unfamiliar softness stirring within, a quiet yearning to understand the full spectrum of his own heart. Could he allow his personal feelings to temper his command? Could the power of the connection with Isidora coexist with the ironclad traditions that had defined his lineage for centuries? The questions haunted him, each one a silent plea for a resolution that might reconcile the competing facets of his identity. As the night deepened and the whispers of the pack faded into the background, Darius resolved to confront this inner turmoil head-on. He knew that the path ahead would be fraught with difficult choices and potentially perilous consequences. Yet, buried beneath the layers of duty and the weight of ancient customs, there was a spark of hope, a belief that perhaps, in embracing this unexpected bond, he could redefine what it meant to lead. With a deep, steadying breath, he closed his eyes and let the conflicting emotions wash over him. In that vulnerable, honest moment, Darius accepted that leadership was not solely about maintaining order, but also about daring to evolve. And though the burden of tradition pressed heavily upon him, he realized that the future of the Silver Dawn Pack might depend on his ability to balance the call of the past with the promise of a new, transformative destiny. Under the weight of relentless whispers and the searing gaze of judgment, Isidora felt a transformation stir within her, a shift from quiet resignation to defiant resolve. In the solitude of her room, illuminated by the dim light of a single lantern, she revisited every moment of the night, every pulse of that unexpected luminous mark. It was as if the silver design had etched a secret destiny into her very soul, one that demanded she no longer remain the background figure in her own life. The time had come to challenge the fate that had been forced upon her. With trembling hands, she traced the intricate pattern on her skin, each gentle caress a reminder of both the divine decree and the heavy burden of expectations. Her mind raced with memories of being overshadowed by her radiant sister, Lysandra, whose brilliance had long been the pride of the Bloodrose family. Now, that same brilliance had been snatched away by the merciless twist of destiny. Guilt mingled with a burgeoning fire of defiance as she recalled every slight, every moment of being overlooked. The scales of fate had tilted, and it was no longer acceptable to fade silently into obscurity. Determination crystallized in her heart as she resolved. She would fight for her own identity and claim the honor that fate had inexplicably bestowed upon her. Isidora would challenge Lysandra, not out of spite, but as a declaration that the mate mark was no mere accident, no arbitrary twist of divine intervention. It was a sign, a sacred call to prove her worth, her strength, and her ability to lead alongside the Alpha. The decision was both desperate and daring, a bold step into an arena where every whisper and every glance. In the quiet moments before dawn, as the pack's murmurs slowly receded into the background, Isidora paced the worn wooden floor of her modest chamber. Each footstep echoed the pounding of her heart, reverberating with the promise of the imminent challenge. The familiar ache of uncertainty was tempered by an emboldened spirit. She could no longer allow herself to be defined by the role of the unseen observer. She had to seize the opportunity to rewrite her own destiny. The cost, she knew, might be high. There would be pain, humiliation, and perhaps even further alienation. Yet the alternative, a life perpetually confined to the shadows, was a fate far more unbearable. The decision to confront her sister was not made lightly. In her mind, the challenge was framed as a test of destiny itself. A contest to prove that the mark was a deliberate sign from the gods, a beacon of hidden potential rather than a cruel twist of fate. With every heartbeat, she imagined the battle, not only as physical combat but as a symbolic duel between the old order and a new possibility. Was she strong enough to stand against the brilliance of Lysandra? Could her quiet determination rise to meet the fierce power that had always defined her sister? As the early morning light began to soften the darkness outside, Isidora's resolve only deepened. The uncertainty of the outcome danced before her, a tantalizing mix of hope and dread. Every thought of the impending challenge ignited both excitement and fear. She had always been the gentle, introspective soul, content to let others take the spotlight. But now, every fiber of her being cried out for recognition, for the chance to prove that she was more than just a subordinate cast aside by fate. With her decision made, she sought out the few trusted confidants who had offered solace during the tumultuous night. In a hushed conversation that resonated with shared determination, she spoke of the battle to come, a formal contest that would not only settle the question of her worth, but also redefine the very balance of power within. The Silver Dawn Pack. She was determined to challenge not just her sister, but the very traditions that had long dictated the course of her life. In this challenge, the outcome remained an open question, a mystery that would test her physical prowess and the depth of her resolve. Her thoughts swirled with anticipation. What would the duel reveal about her inner strength? Could she truly harness the power of the divine mark and transform it into a force for change? Or would the legacy of her sister's dominance prove too insurmountable, condemning her to a life of perpetual subjugation? These questions, though unanswered, only stoked the flames of her resolve further. As Isidora stepped into the uncertain dawn, every step was imbued with the promise of transformation. The challenge was not merely a contest of physical skill. It was an existential confrontation, a moment to reclaim her identity, to challenge the dictates of fate, and to assert that she was more than a forgotten name in the shadow of her illustrious kin. With the first light of day casting long shadows on the path ahead, she embraced the cost of her decision, ready to fight for a destiny that was hers alone. The seeds of rebellion had been sown, and in that quiet, resolute moment, Isidora vowed that no matter the outcome, she would forge a new chapter in the legacy of the Silver Dawn Pack, one written in her own determined hand. Before dawn, the chill in the air carried a promise of renewal as Isidora stepped into a world that was both harsh and invigorating. Under the careful guidance of Milo, her trusted mentor, she began her rigorous training, a process designed not only to forge her physical strength, but also to transform the tremors of fear into a steadfast resolve. The early morning was a symphony of quiet determination, where the only sounds were the steady beat of her heart, the rhythmic thud of her footsteps on dew-dampened earth, and the soft, encouraging words of Milo echoing in the stillness. Milo's voice, calm yet insistent, cut through the cool silence as he directed her every move. "Focus on your stance, Isidora," he urged, his tone carrying both challenge and support. Each instruction resonated with clarity as she adjusted her posture and positioned her feet just so, absorbing every detail like a sacred ritual. The clang of wooden weapons against practice dummies filled the air intermittently, punctuating the steady cadence of her movements as she honed her technique. Every swing of her practice sword, every defensive maneuver, was a small battle in itself, a confrontation with the lingering doubts of her past. As the training progressed, the physical strain manifested vividly in every bead of sweat that gathered on her brow. The cool morning air, heavy with the scent of damp earth and fresh foliage, clashed with the rising heat of exertion. Her muscles, once timid and untested, now burned with an intensity that was both painful and liberating. With every feint and parry, she could feel the raw power of her body awakening, a strength that had long lain dormant beneath layers of self-doubt. The taste of salt and determination mingled on her lips as she pushed herself to the limit, driven by an inner fire that was ignited by the bond etched on her skin. Milo's guidance was both strict and nurturing. He observed her movements with a keen eye, adjusting her form with a gentle yet firm touch. "Let your instincts guide you," he whispered during a brief pause, as if the early light of dawn itself had lent him wisdom. In that moment, Isidora felt the subtle shift from fear to resolve. Each correction, each word of encouragement, transformed her doubt into a spark of confidence. The once overwhelming terror of stepping into the arena was now being channeled into every precise movement. Every thrust and retreat was a declaration that she was more than the sum of her insecurities. The physical exertion was matched by an equally profound emotional metamorphosis. As she moved through the training yard, her thoughts, once clouded by memories of being overshadowed, began to clear like a fog lifting at sunrise. The repeated cycles of exertion and recovery mirrored the internal battle that had raged within her. With each round of drills, she learned to accept her scars, both visible and hidden, as marks of growth rather than symbols of failure. In the echo of each strike against the wooden practice weapons, she heard a promise to herself that she would no longer be defined by the past, but rather by the strength she was building with every determined movement. The atmosphere around her was charged with a palpable sense of purpose. The training yard, bathed in the gentle golden glow of the emerging sun, became a crucible where fear was melted away by the heat of perseverance. The cool morning light illuminated the sweat on her skin, highlighting the fierce concentration etched into her features. In that glow, Isidora's eyes shone with a newfound clarity, a clear declaration that she was ready to forge her own destiny, regardless of the heavy burden of tradition or the bitter rivalry that loomed in the background. Every challenge Milo set before her pushed her further, both physically and emotionally. When she faltered, he was there to steady her, his hands guiding hers until the rhythm of her strikes grew more assured. "Remember, strength is not just in the muscle," he reminded her, "but in the will to overcome your doubts." These words echoed in her mind as she practiced her footwork, pivoting and lunging with an elegance that belied the storm of emotions inside her. She was learning to transform the fear of failure into a force that propelled her forward, each misstep a lesson, each successful move a testament to her growing resolve. As the training session drew to a close and the sun climbed higher, casting long, determined shadows on the ground, Isidora felt an undeniable transformation taking root. The exhaustion in her limbs was tempered by a deep sense of achievement, a subtle, internal shift from a place of quiet resignation to one of bold determination. She had begun to understand that this relentless regimen was not merely a preparation for battle, but a metamorphosis of the self. The mate mark, the symbol of her unexpected destiny, no longer felt like a cruel twist of fate. Instead, it had become a call to arms, a challenge to prove that she was more than a reluctant observer, but a force that could command respect and redefine her own narrative. In that transformative dawn, as the final echoes of practice faded into the rising day, Isidora's resolve stood as tall as the ancient trees surrounding the yard. The trials of the morning had prepared her body and sharpened her mind, but more importantly, they had kindled a flame within, a fierce determination to fight for her place, to prove that destiny was not an unalterable decree, but a challenge that one could rise to meet. And with that realization, she embraced the coming challenge with open arms, ready to step into a future that was entirely her own. As the first light of day broke over the Silver Dawn Pack's territory, an undercurrent of disquiet rippled through the gathered members. The revelation of the mate mark and Isidora's audacious decision to challenge her sister had ignited a firestorm of whispers that spread like wildfire, igniting old rivalries and forging unexpected alliances. The pack's unity, once as unyielding as the ancient oaks that lined their borders, now seemed precarious. In the hallways and courtyards, hushed conversations grew louder with every passing moment. Among the older, seasoned wolves, eyes narrowed as they exchanged knowing glances, their expressions a mix of admiration and disapproval. "This is not the way our traditions were meant to unfold," murmured one elder, his voice heavy with the weight of generations past. To him, the divine mark was a sacred symbol, an unalterable decree from the moon goddess, meant only for those who had long been destined to lead. Yet here it was, adorning the hand of a quiet, once overlooked sister, challenging the very fabric of established order. Within the throng, factions began to form. One group, fervent believers in the old ways, rallied behind the sanctity of the goddess's will. They whispered with reverence, convinced that Isidora's fate, as inscribed by the divine, was unchallengeable. Their voices, laced with both certainty and fear, urged caution. "We must honor what has been decreed," they insisted, their tones resolute. In their eyes, any challenge to the mark was not only a personal affront, but a potential threat to the entire legacy of the pack. Opposing this fervor were those who harbored deep-seated doubts. A quieter, more pragmatic faction questioned the wisdom of embracing an unexpected twist so unmoored from tradition. What if this is merely a misinterpretation? A fleeting anomaly meant to distract us from real threats? They speculated in low, urgent tones. These skeptics saw the impending duel not simply as a contest of strength, but as a harbinger of political shifts, moves that could undermine established alliances and, in turn, destabilize the delicate balance of power. Amid the growing unrest, alliances began to coalesce in subtle yet unmistakable ways. Some high-ranking wolves, whose loyalty to the old guard ran deep, sided with Lysandra, viewing Isidora's challenge as an act of defiance against the natural order. Their support, however, was not expressed in open confrontation, but through discreet nods and the quiet consolidation of influence. Meanwhile, others, perhaps more progressive in their thinking, recognized the potential for transformation in this disruption. They saw in Isidora not just a defiant challenger, but a symbol of change, a chance to redefine leadership by embracing the unforeseen gifts of fate. Their murmurs were filled with cautious optimism, even as they weighed the risk of fracturing the pack's unity. The corridors of the pack house became battlegrounds for political maneuvering. Secret meetings were held in shadowed rooms where influential figures debated the implications of the mate mark. Some argued that the unexpected bond was a sign that the times were changing, that clinging blindly to tradition could blind the pack to emerging strengths. Others countered that deviating from the time-honored path was a dangerous gamble, one that might invite internal strife and leave the pack vulnerable to external threats. The tension in these discussions was palpable, each word laden with the gravity of decisions that could alter the pack's destiny. Every whispered rumor, every furtive glance, added another layer to the simmering drama. The prospect of a duel between Isidora and Lysandra loomed like a dark storm on the horizon, its outcome uncertain, its consequences far-reaching. Those who supported the traditional order saw the duel as a necessary means to restore balance, while the more reform-minded voices hoped it might pave the way for a new era of leadership, one that could reconcile ancient customs with the realities of an evolving world. The emotional strain was evident on every face. Anxiety, determination, and a trace of defiance painted the expressions of both young and old. The pack, bound by centuries of shared struggles and triumphs, now found itself at a crossroads. The anticipated duel was not merely a contest of physical prowess. It was a symbolic clash that encapsulated the conflict between heritage and innovation. In the charged silence that followed these murmurs, one thing was clear. The fate of the Silver Dawn pack hung in a precarious balance. The unexpected bond had stirred long-dormant conflicts and awakened ambitions that had lain hidden beneath layers of tradition. And as the murmurs of dissent and support intermingled, the stage was being set for a confrontation that promised to reshape the very essence of leadership within the pack. The duel, shrouded in mystery and rife with potential, beckoned, a challenge that would test not only the physical strength of the combatants, but also the resilience of an entire community on the brink of transformation. The dawn of the day promised not only a new beginning, but a confrontation that would reverberate through the very soul of the Silver Dawn pack. In the grand hall, every detail had been meticulously prepared to transform the space into a stage where destiny itself would be put on display. The polished wooden floors gleamed with the reflection of the early light, each plank a silent witness to centuries of tradition and the impending clash of wills. Towering columns, carved with intricate motifs of past glories and mythic battles, rose from the floor like ancient sentinels, their presence lending the hall an air of timeless authority. Outside, the training yard offered a stark contrast. A rugged arena where the raw energy of the pack's warriors was channeled into disciplined preparation. The yard was marked by a rough-hewn boundary, chalked lines that would soon serve as the battleground for the duel. Here, The cool morning air carried the scent of damp earth and fresh dew, blending with the underlying aroma of sweat and anticipation. Every sound, the crisp snap of chalk against stone, the distant call of a pack member, and the rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze, seemed amplified, as if nature itself was attuned to the gravity of the day. Within the grand hall, the atmosphere was charged with an almost palpable tension. The elegant drapery, carefully arranged to frame the space in a cascade of subtle colors, contrasted with the rigid formality of the ritualistic setup. Rows of chairs, aligned with geometric precision, faced a raised platform that had been prepared for the solemn announcements and declarations that would precede the duel. The silence that filled the hall was not empty. It was a reverent pause, a collective breath held in anticipation of what was to come. At the center of this solemn gathering stood Elder Jonas, a figure whose very presence commanded respect and lent the proceedings an air of unwavering authority. Draped in traditional robes that carried the weight of countless generations, his silver hair and weathered features were a testament to a life spent upholding the customs of the pack. With deliberate and measured steps, Elder Jonas ascended the platform, his gaze sweeping over the assembled members with a mix of solemnity and expectation. His voice, deep and resonant, cut through the silence, each word imbued with the gravitas of ancient rites and the solemn duty of leadership. Today, Elder Jonas intoned, we gather not merely to witness a contest of strength, but to affirm the sacred traditions that have long guided our people. This duel is a rite of passage, a testament to the enduring power of destiny, honor, and the will of the moon goddess. His words resonated through the hall, stirring the hearts of those gathered and reminding each pack member of the significance of the moment. The formal tone of his address set the stage for the duel, heightening the stakes and anchoring the event in the deep history of the pack's lore. Every element of the day had been arranged to amplify the ritualistic nature of the duel. The sound of footsteps on polished wood, the distant murmur of whispered prayers, and the faint, rhythmic drumming of a ceremonial beat contributed to a sensory tapestry that bound tradition with anticipation. The polished surfaces reflected not only the physical images of the pack's proud members, but also the invisible currents of emotion, pride, anxiety, hope, and an undercurrent of defiance that pulsed like a secret promise among those who had dared to challenge fate. As the pack gathered, a hushed murmur of voices filled the spaces between the columns. Each member, from the venerable elders to the youngest recruits, was united by a shared sense of destiny. Eyes darted between the grand hall and the training yard, where the final preparations for the duel were underway. The vivid interplay of light and shadow, of soft dawn hues mingling with the resolute glow of tradition, painted a picture of a community on the brink of transformation. The energy was infectious, a subtle promise that the coming contest would not only decide personal. Within this charged setting, every detail was symbolic. The meticulously arranged decor was a visual reminder of the pack's storied past, while the rough, unyielding boundaries of the training yard spoke of the challenges that lay ahead. It was here, under the watchful eyes of Elder Jonas and the silent approval of the gathered pack, that the duel would unfold. A contest destined to test not only the physical prowess of the combatants, but also their inner strength and resolve. As the day progressed, the anticipation grew ever more intense. The formalities of the ceremony, and the reverence with which Elder Jonas spoke, underscored the magnitude of the moment, setting the stage for a confrontation that promised to be as transformative as it was turbulent. In that delicate balance between tradition and change, the Silver Dawn Pack braced itself for a duel that would echo through time. A moment when destiny, honor, and the fierce spirit of rebellion would collide in a blaze of unyielding determination. The duel began. The charged air erupted with the rapid staccato of clashing wooden swords. In the center of the marked arena, under the expectant gaze of the gathered pack, Isidora and Lysandra faced each other. a collision of destiny and determination. Every heartbeat resounded in the silence that followed Elder Jonas's command, as if the very air awaited the first strike with bated breath. Lysandra, radiant and formidable as ever, sprang forward with a burst of raw power. Her movement was fluid, yet forceful, a whirlwind of strength honed by years of training and the unyielding pressure of expectations. In one swift, decisive motion, her sword sliced through the air in a powerful overhead strike, aimed directly at Isidora. The impact of that initial assault was a visceral reminder of Lysandra's dominance, a display of force that left no room for hesitation. The resounding thud of her strike echoed across the polished floor, a sound that sent tremors through the hearts of onlookers. Yet, Isidora, driven by a newfound fire and tempered by her rigorous training, met the challenge with agile determination. With her eyes blazing with a mixture of defiance and quiet resolve, she shifted her weight nimbly, her movements a study in controlled precision. As Lysandra's strike descended, Isidora's sword met it with a parry that, though nearly as forceful, bore the signature of her own emerging style, a delicate blend of finesse and unyielding will. Sparks seemed to fly where the blades clashed, the meeting of steel-like wood reverberating with the raw energy of their contrasting natures. The duel transformed into a rapid exchange, a kinetic dance where each feint and riposte was executed with breathtaking speed. Lysandra's strikes were bold and aggressive, each swing a declaration of her long-held status as the pack's shining star. Her movements were a cascade of power, each step calculated to assert dominance. But Isidora, though less imposing in stature, moved with a fluid grace that belied the intense pressure she had endured. Every motion was a testament to her inner transformation. Her body, once accustomed to the background, now commanded every inch of space with precise, almost balletic determination. The arena resounded with the rhythmic clatter of their wooden swords, the sounds merging into a fierce symphony of conflict. Each parry was a counterpoint to a fierce thrust, and every feint drew gasps from the crowd as they witnessed a contest that was both physical and profoundly emotional. In every subtle shift of her posture, Isidora revealed a glimpse of vulnerability, a fleeting moment when her eyes betrayed the weight of the unexpected destiny she had been forced to accept. And in those same moments, Lysandra's glare flashed with a mix of superiority and wounded pride, a silent accusation that the spotlight had been stolen, that her rightful place had been usurped. As the duel progressed, the contrast between raw power and agile determination grew ever starker. Lysandra's every movement exuded a force of nature, a relentless barrage of strikes that pressed forward with the intensity of a storm. Her approach was unyielding, her technique honed through years of relentless practice and the burden of living up to her celebrated legacy. In response, Isidora harnessed her burgeoning strength with a calm, almost ethereal resilience. She danced on the edges of each attack, her body bending with the fluidity of a river carving its path through stone. Each dodge, each counterstrike, was executed with a quiet precision that the emotional interplay was as potent as the physical conflict. For every moment that Lysandra roared her determination with every powerful swing, Isidora answered with a silent plea for recognition, a yearning to prove that her quiet resolve was not a sign of weakness, but of untapped potential. Their duel was not merely an exchange of blows, it was a dialogue of destiny, where every clash of their weapons carried with it the weight of years of rivalry, unspoken grievances, and the promise of a new future. In one particularly breathtaking moment, as Lysandra's sword arced downward with the force of a crashing wave, Isidora found an opening, a fleeting gap in her sister's formidable defense. With her heart pounding like a war drum, she pivoted swiftly, her wooden sword thrusting forward in a daring counterattack. The impact was subtle, yet it carried the full force of her defiance, a silent proclamation that she was not here to fade into the shadows. The crowd's collective breath seemed to catch, a moment suspended in time where the outcome of the duel teetered on a razor's edge. as the opening exchange gave way to another rapid flurry of strikes and parries. The duel's intensity escalated, building towards a climax that promised to redefine the balance of power within the pack. Every clash, every whispered exhalation, was a testament to the ferocity of their struggle. A struggle where strength and agility, legacy and ambition, converged in a breathtaking clash of destiny. And as the arena vibrated with the sound of their battle, one truth became increasingly clear. In this duel, every strike was a step toward a future yet to be written, a future where the very nature of fate itself might be challenged, and perhaps rewritten. Midway through the duel, the atmosphere in the arena grew thick with the raw intensity of clashing wills. The steady, rhythmic sound of wooden swords meeting in fierce combat filled the air, a relentless symphony of strikes, parries, and the muted thud of footsteps on the polished ground. Every collision sent a shudder through the assembly, as if the very heart of the Silver Dawn Pack beat in time with the struggle unfolding before them. Isidora found herself locked in a grueling battle against her sister's overwhelming power. Lysandra's blows were like crashing waves, each one driven by years of unyielding training and the force of a legacy that had always seemed insurmountable. The impact of her strikes reverberated through Isidora's arms, and for every powerful swing, she felt the sting of her own limitations. Yet, even as the pain flared and her muscles trembled with exertion, a quiet determination began to kindle within her. Summoning every ounce of ingenuity and grit, Isidora began to weave a dance of agile maneuvers around her sister's raw strength. She moved with an elegance that belied the fierce determination burning in her eyes. With every nimble pivot, she sidestepped a crushing blow, and with each clever feint, she exploited even the slightest opening in Lysandra's formidable defense. The sound of their blades, sharp rhythmic clashes punctuated by the hiss of displaced air, created a backdrop that was as much a part of the duel as the participants themselves. In that crucial moment, Isidora's mind cleared. The cacophony of the arena faded into a distant echo, replaced by the pounding of her own heart, a constant, drumming reminder of the stakes at hand. The metallic tang of adrenaline filled her mouth, mixing with the saltiness of sweat that dripped down her temples and soaked her determined brow. Every sensation was magnified: the gritty texture of the wooden sword in her hand, the sting of perspiration on her skin, the sharp rhythmic clatter of each parried strike. It was in these sensory details that she began to truly grasp the essence of the battle, a contest not only of physical might, but of unwavering will and refined technique. Despite the weight of her sister's superior strength, Isidora's every calculated movement began to reveal her hidden potential. She realized that power was not solely measured by brute force, but also by the grace of precise timing and the courage to innovate under pressure. With each evasive maneuver, she chipped away at the notion that she was destined only to linger in the shadow of her illustrious sibling. Instead, she started to forge a path uniquely her own, a path defined by intelligence, persistence, and an unyielding resolve to prove herself. Lysandra's attacks remained relentless. Each swing of her sword was imbued with a raw, untempered force that seemed capable of shattering any barrier in its path. Yet, even as her blows came with the inevitability of a tidal wave, Isidora's counterattacks were like deft ripostes, in a ballet, swift, subtle, and strategically devastating. The interplay of their movements was a captivating dance of light and shadow, strength and agility. The duel's intensity escalated with every passing second. The arena seemed to shrink around them, drawing every eye into the small, charged space where destiny was being rewritten. Isidora's mind, though acutely aware of the physical strain, the burning in her limbs, the pounding in her ears, also began to recognize the blossoming of an inner strength that had long been dormant. Each successful block, every cunning dodge, fueled her belief that she could transcend the role fate had imposed on her. The realization was electrifying. She was no longer merely the quiet, overlooked sister. She was a force capable of challenging the very expectations that had confined her for so long. As the duel entered its most critical phase, the contrast between the sisters grew ever more pronounced. Lysandra's raw power, honed over a lifetime, clashed with Isidora's agile determination, a blend of innovation and instinct that was steadily gaining ground. The pounding of their hearts, the rapid breaths drawn in between strikes, and the chorus of their clashing swords created a vivid tapestry of sound that underscored every nuance of the confrontation. In that moment, with the fate of their legacies, and the future of the pack hanging in the balance, the battle became more than a mere contest of physical prowess. It transformed into a powerful symbol of internal evolution, a test of whether one could harness the tempest of fear and transform it into an unstoppable force of will. And as Isidora's every strike carried the weight of her newfound resolve, the arena bore silent witness to the emergence of a warrior determined to claim her own destiny. In a breathless, electrifying moment, the duel reached its crescendo. The tension in the arena was so thick, it felt as if every heartbeat of the gathered pack was synchronized with the clash of wooden swords. Isidora, her muscles screaming from the relentless exchange of blows, found herself teetering on the razor's edge between defeat and victory. With every strike, she could feel the full force of her sister's raw power, a force that had defined Lysandra for years. But now, driven by a deep, unyielding defiance, Isidora sensed that something within her was about to change everything. As the duel raged on, the relentless barrage of Lysandra's attacks pushed Isidora back, forcing her to retreat to the very boundary of the marked arena. Her limbs trembled, and sweat dripped in steady rivulets down her face. For a moment, it seemed as though the overwhelming power of her sister might indeed crush her spirit. Yet deep in the pit of her stomach, a primal instinct awakened, a surge of raw, untamed energy that had long been confined by her quiet, reserved nature. Time slowed to a crawl as Isidora's mind raced. In that suspended heartbeat, the clamor of the arena, the rhythmic clashing of swords, the murmurs of the anxious crowd, the pounding of her own heart, faded into a singular focus, survival, and the desperate need to prove herself. With a surge of clarity born from years of suppressed determination, she felt the call of her inner wolf. It was as though every moment of doubt, every shadow cast by her sister's brilliance, converged into a singular, luminous flame of defiance. In one split second, as Lysandra swung her sword with the force of an avalanche, Isidora pivoted with astonishing agility. The move was unexpected, a game-changing maneuver that defied the calculated precision of the battle. She shifted her weight in an almost instinctive flourish, letting go of the cautious finesse that had characterized her earlier defense. Instead, she embraced the raw, unfiltered energy of her primal instincts. Her wooden sword arced in a swift, ferocious counterattack, aimed not just to parry, but to decisively break through her opponent's guard. A collective gasp erupted from the assembled pack as the impact of her strike reverberated across the arena. The sound was sharp, a piercing collision of wood and willpower that silenced the murmurs for a heartbeat. In that suspended moment, the entire pack seemed to hold its breath, caught between the shock of the unexpected maneuver and the overwhelming anticipation of what might come next. Lysandra's eyes widened in disbelief as she staggered, momentarily, thrown off balance by the force of Isidora's counterattack. For the first time in the duel, the tide began to shift. The elegant, calculated aggression of Lysandra met the raw, defiant surge of Isidora's newly unleashed power, a power born of years of quiet yearning, now transformed into a blazing statement of self-worth. The arena, once a stage for relentless strength, in that critical instant, every second stretched out as if it were an eternity. Isidora's mind flickered with images of her past, a life spent in the background, overshadowed by the brilliance of her sister, before merging with a vision of her potential future. It was a future where she would no longer be the forgotten shadow, but a force in her own right, capable of challenging the very traditions that had once seemed immutable. Her decision, made in the blink of an eye, was a testament to the power of defiance, a declaration that destiny was not something imposed from above, but a path to be forged with courage and conviction. The impact of her unexpected move sent a shockwave through the pack. Supporters of the old ways, who had once viewed the sacred traditions as untouchable, now exchanged furtive, uncertain glances. Critics, long entrenched in their doubts, found their skepticism challenged by the very embodiment of resilience before them. The atmosphere was charged with suspense, the outcome of the duel now hanging by a thread, precariously balanced between the forces of fate and free will. Isidora's eyes, burning with determination, locked with her sister's for a brief, excruciating moment. In that glance there was no room for doubt or hesitation, only the fierce, unyielding promise of one who would fight for her own destiny. The split-second decision had redefined the duel, transforming it from a mere contest of physical prowess into an epic clash of spirit, a battle of wills that would be remembered for generations. And as the echoes of her decisive strike faded into the charged silence of the arena, every onlooker was left to wonder, would this moment of unyielding defiance propel Isidora to ultimate victory? Or would the ancient forces of tradition reclaim their dominion? The question hung in the air, heavy with possibility, as the duel teetered on the edge of its final, fateful outcome. As the duel reached its final, breathless moments, the charged silence of the arena shattered into an eruption of emotion. Isidora, her arms trembling with exertion and pain, stood victorious as her wooden sword lay forgotten at her side. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause, the only sound the ragged breaths escaping her lips, and the echo of her heartbeat, thundering, in her ears. In that climactic instant, relief, triumph, and a heavy, bittersweet burden coalesced within her, each emotion a testament to the fierce struggle she had endured. The crowd erupted in a cacophony of reactions. Some pack members leapt to their feet, their cheers ringing out like a roar of approval, celebrating the unexpected rise of the quiet, once overlooked sister. Their claps and shouts of adulation mingled with the rustling of whispered congratulations from those who had dared to hope that change was possible. Yet amid the celebration, there were murmurs of disquiet, a chorus of voices laden with skepticism and bitter regret. Detractors exchanged uncertain glances, their eyes narrowed with disapproval, as if the sanctity of tradition had been defiled by this unforeseen turn of events. Even among the elders, expressions of conflicted pride and apprehension could be seen, their aged faces etched with the knowledge that the pack's future was now subject to a new, unpredictable force. Isidora's gaze swept over the assembly, taking, in every look, of admiration, of doubt, and of unresolved anger. In that moment, her mind raced with the magnitude of what had just transpired. Every strike, every feint, every counterattack had been more than physical. It was a declaration of her will to redefine her destiny. And now, as the cheers of victory reverberated through the hall, she felt an overwhelming mix of pride and sorrow. The triumph was hers, yet it was laced with the weight of a bond she had never chosen, a mark, glowing faintly on her skin, that would forever tie her fate to a destiny dictated by ancient, unyielding forces. Her heart pounded with conflicting rhythms. On one side was the heady surge of victory, a realization that she had finally stepped out of the shadows and proven her worth. The exhilaration of defying expectations and challenging the age-old hierarchy surged through her veins, making her pulse feel as if it might burst from her chest. On the other side, an insidious heaviness lingered, the burden of an unbidden bond that now defined her existence. With each breath, she was reminded that while she had won the duel, she had also inherited a legacy that came with both honor and responsibility. A legacy. In the wake of her victory, Darius's solemn nod and the quiet murmur of approval from some high-ranking wolves lent a sense of official validation to her hard-won success. Yet, even as the pack acknowledged her as a potential leader, a ripple, of uncertainty spread among those who had long trusted in the old ways. Was this moment the dawn of a new era for the Silver Dawn Pack, or the harbinger of internal strife and fractured alliances? The very air seemed thick with the possibility of change, a change that, while celebrated by some, was viewed with wary eyes by others. As the pack began to disperse, their voices a blend of joyous exultation and subdued lament, Isidora stood, alone for a fleeting moment at the center of the arena. Her body ached from the exertion of combat, and the sting of sweat and blood mingled on her skin. The echo of every strike reverberated within her, a reminder of the transformation that had taken place. She looked down at the mate mark, a delicate, luminescent trace that pulsed softly, as if to remind her of the burden now etched into her very being. It was a symbol of fate, both a blessing and a curse, that would forever alter the course of her life. In that solitary moment, the internal battle raged within her. Pride swelled in her chest, fueled by the memory of each clever maneuver and every desperate counterattack that had culminated in her victory. But interwoven with that pride was a profound sense of responsibility, a realization that her newfound strength came at a cost. The bond was not merely a physical mark, it was a mantle of destiny that demanded sacrifice, courage, and the willingness to challenge the established order of the pack. Her mind drifted to the challenge that lay ahead, not only to win the respect of the pack and of Darius, but to reconcile the conflicting emotions that now defined her. Could she bear the weight of a destiny that had chosen her, even as it threatened to uproot everything she had known? The question lingered like an unspoken vow in the quiet aftermath, a promise that her journey was far from over. With a steadying breath, Isidora resolved to carry the weight of her triumph and her burden with equal parts strength and humility. The cheers of victory, the murmurs of dissent, and the silent, piercing gaze of tradition all converged into a single, inescapable truth. She had changed the course of her life, and, by extension, the future of the Silver Dawn Pack. And now, as the echoes of the duel faded into the charged silence of the aftermath, she stepped forward into an uncertain tomorrow, each step a testament to the enduring power of defiance and the bittersweet price of destiny. After the tumult of the duel, as the echoes of clashing swords and the fervent cheers of the pack began to fade, Darius stepped forward with a measured grace that betrayed the inner transformation he was experiencing. His eyes, once as guarded as a fortress, now softened with a hint of vulnerability, a subtle yet unmistakable acknowledgement of the remarkable strength he had just witnessed in Isidora. In that quiet moment, away from the raucous celebration and lingering tensions, the Alpha moved toward her, as if drawn by an invisible tether of fate. Darius's approach was uncharacteristically gentle. His strides, deliberate and unhurried, carried a calm assurance that seemed to fill the space between them with a quiet promise. As he neared, the air around them shifted. The charged atmosphere of the duel gave way to an intimacy born of shared destiny. Reaching out, he took Isidora's hand, a gesture that spoke louder than any formal accolade. The touch was tender and reverent, as if he were handling a sacred relic, and in that brief contact, a silent understanding passed between them. It was a moment where duty and desire intermingled, softening the rigid boundaries that tradition had long imposed. "Isidora," he murmured, his voice low and steady, carrying an undercurrent of both admiration and personal revelation. "Today, you have shown a strength that transcends mere combat. I see in you a spirit that is destined for greatness, one that can reshape not only your own future, but the future of our pack." His words, though few, were imbued with a sincerity that cut through the usual reserve of his demeanor. In the bow timbre of his voice, there was a promise, an invitation to embrace a destiny that was no longer dictated solely by ancient custom, but also by the crowd around them had begun to disperse, leaving a lingering silence that was filled only with the murmurs of those who understood the significance of this moment. In that quiet aftermath, Darius's eyes held Isidora's with an intensity that was both comforting and challenging. It was as if, for the first time, he was willing to let his guard down and reveal a glimpse of the man beneath the Alpha's imposing exterior. A man burdened by leadership, yet yearning for a connection that could ease that weight. The sight of Isidora's determined expression, still flushed with the exertions of battle and the glow of victory, sparked something in him that he had long thought dormant. "Your courage today," Darius continued, his voice softening further, "has not gone unnoticed. The bond we share, whether by the decree of fate or by our own choosing, is undeniable. I will not ignore it, nor the possibility that we might, together, forge a new path for our people." His words, spoken with the quiet authority of a leader, carried the weight of his internal struggle, a struggle between the rigid adherence to tradition and the unexpected, stirring call of a future reimagined. In that moment, as he spoke, the Alpha's usual stoicism gave way to a delicate, introspective tenderness, and a genuine alliance began to form in the space between them. Isidora felt a warmth spread through her at his words, a mixture of relief and cautious optimism that felt almost transformative. The raw intensity of the duel had subsided, leaving in its wake the soft murmur of a new beginning. Darius, with eyes that now shone with a blend of respect and budding affection, continued to hold her hand, as if to anchor both of them to this fragile yet powerful connection. The gesture was not merely one of acknowledgement, but also of solidarity, a silent promise to face the challenges ahead together. As the remaining pack members looked on, their expressions a mix of approval and uncertainty, it became clear that something profound had shifted. The traditional lines that had long defined relationships within the pack were blurring. In Darius's measured tone and the careful warmth of his touch, there was an implicit acceptance that destiny could be reshaped, that bonds, once considered immutable, might evolve into alliances built on mutual respect and shared ambition. In the quiet moments that followed, Darius and Isidora lingered in their private exchange. His eyes, still deep and contemplative, met hers with an unspoken question, a query about whether the path they were beginning to walk could withstand the turbulent tides of tradition and internal politics. The answer lay not in words, but in the gentle squeeze of his hand and the resolute set of her gaze. It was a mutual recognition that while the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, together they might be able to forge a destiny that honored both the old ways and the promise of a renewed future. In that tender, reflective space, as the first whispers of a new alliance took root, the future of the Silver Dawn Pack seemed to shimmer with possibility, a possibility that dared to challenge the dictates of fate and embrace the transformative power of a bond redefined by courage, empathy, and the shared strength of two souls united in destiny. In the aftermath of the fierce duel, the atmosphere within the Silver Dawn Pack began to shift subtly yet unmistakably. As the echoes of clashing wooden swords faded into the background, the pack's leaders and elders slowly emerged from their private corners to assess the outcome. The raw intensity of the battle had given way to a quiet ripple of reconciliation, a cautious acknowledgement that the age-old traditions might be adapting to unforeseen change. Elder Jonas, whose presence had lent a solemn gravity to the duel, now addressed the assembled pack with a measured tone. His weathered face, lined by decades of wisdom and leadership, conveyed a mix of relief and concern. "We have witnessed a contest of destiny today," he intoned, his voice resonating across the polished floor of the grand hall. "While the outcome may not align perfectly with our long-held expectations, it is a testament to the strength and spirit that has always defined our people." His words, deliberate and steady, were met with murmurs of cautious approval, a collective sigh that suggested the elders were beginning to accept the duel's result, albeit with a lingering wariness. Among the pack, reactions were as varied as they were intense. Some members, especially those who had long clung to the sanctity of ancient customs, exchanged looks of quiet disbelief mixed with grudging admiration. Their eyes, however, could not entirely mask the uncertainty that now danced behind them. To them, the victorious display of Isidora's resilience was both inspiring and unsettling, a sign that the established order was shifting. Family members, too, were caught in a web of conflicting emotions. Isidora's parents, Mallory and Pierce, wore expressions of relief tempered by sorrow. The relief came from the realization that the tension that had gripped their household might finally begin to ease, that their daughter had proven her mettle in a way that could redefine her future. Yet, the sorrow was equally palpable. The realization that the path ahead was fraught with new challenges, and that the duel had irrevocably altered the course of their family's destiny. Pierce's eyes, which had once brimmed with quiet pride, now reflected a deep, pensive uncertainty, while Mallory's gentle features were shadowed by the weight of apprehension. Even Lysandra, who had long been the radiant focal point of the Bloodrose family, struggled with a complex array of emotions. Though her face maintained a regal composure, there was an unmistakable flicker of hurt and resentment in her eyes, a silent acknowledgement that the bond, as decreed by fate, had intruded upon her envisioned future. Yet, beneath that resentment, lay a grudging acceptance. She too recognized, in the quiet aftershocks of the duel, that the outcome was a reality they must all learn to live with. The tension between the sisters, while momentarily subdued by the formal proceedings, simmered beneath the surface, a reminder that the reconciliation was as fragile as it was necessary. Within the broader ranks of the pack, alliances began to subtly reform. Those who had supported the ancient ways rallied around the notion that tradition, though challenged, was not yet vanquished. Their cautious nods and whispered assurances suggested a commitment to maintaining order, even as they eyed the new developments with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Conversely, a more progressive faction saw in Isidora's victory the possibility of a revitalized future, one where strength was measured not only by adherence to tradition, but also by the ability to adapt and evolve. This emerging alliance, though quietly expressed, carried a promise of change, a promise that the pack could emerge stronger by embracing a new definition of leadership and unity. As the pack slowly dispersed from the grand hall and training yard, the air was thick with the bittersweet residue of the day's events. The formal rituals that followed the duel were marked by a series of measured acknowledgments, brief speeches by the elders, solemn nods exchanged between influential members, and a pervasive atmosphere of cautious optimism. Every gesture, every whispered word, was an affirmation that while the conflict of the duel had reached a temporary resolution, the underlying tensions remained unresolved. The pack's future, once a steady course dictated by unwavering tradition, now appeared to be a turbulent stream where change was inevitable and uncertainty reigned. In this charged aftermath, Isidora stood at the center of a delicate transformation. Though celebrated for her victory, she felt the dual weight of triumph and responsibility press upon her. The cheers of her supporters mingled with the hushed murmurs of those who doubted, creating an emotional tapestry as complex as the fate that had been sealed by the mate mark. It was a poignant moment of reconciliation, a moment when the Silver Dawn Pack began to understand that even as old orders were questioned, a new era might be emerging from the crucible of conflict. Yet, as the day drew to a close, and the pack retreated into the sanctum of their daily routines, a lingering truth remained. The reconciliation was only the beginning. The victory, however sweet, carried with it the unspoken promise of future challenges. For while the pack now dared to envision a new balance of power, the tension of unresolved rivalries and the potential for renewed strife hung in the air like a persistent shadow. The journey toward unity was far from complete, and every member of the Silver Dawn Pack was left to wonder what trials lay ahead in the wake of this transformative day. In the quiet aftermath of the tumultuous duel, as dusk settled over the Silver Dawn Pack's territory, the pack's elders gathered in a private chamber steeped in tradition and soft candlelight. The room, adorned with symbols of ancient lore and meticulously arranged heirlooms, became the stage for a pivotal discussion, one that would set the course for the pack's future and redefine its long-held customs. Here, the influential voices of the past met the uncertain promise of a new era. Elder Jonas, his silver hair and time-worn features a testament to decades of unwavering leadership, led the assembly. With measured, thoughtful words, he began, "We have witnessed today an event that challenges our every expectation, a bond that the moon goddess has unexpectedly bestowed upon Isidora and Darius. Though our traditions have long guided us, it is clear that fate, in its mysterious design, calls us to reconsider what we hold sacred." His voice, resonant with both authority and cautious optimism, echoed through the chamber, setting the tone for the conversations that followed. Around him, a circle of venerable elders exchanged glances laden with both reverence and concern. One elder, known for his staunch adherence to tradition, spoke first. "This is not merely a disruption. It is an opportunity, a chance to forge new rituals that honor the past while embracing the inevitable evolution of our ways. We must deliberate on a formal acceptance ceremony that recognizes the union of Isidora and Darius as a genuine bond, one that will serve as a new cornerstone for our pack's destiny." His measured tone hinted at the delicate balancing act between honoring heritage and adapting to change. As the discussion deepened, political nuances began to surface. Some elders, wary of upsetting the established hierarchy, expressed reservations about the swift acceptance of the new bond. "We have always maintained that the Alpha's mate is chosen by fate," remarked another elder, his eyes narrowing in thoughtful scrutiny. "Yet this twist, this unexpected alignment, could shift the balance of power. If we formally embrace this new ritual, we must consider the long-term implications on alliances both within and beyond our borders." His words were laced with the foresight of a seasoned strategist, recognizing that every change in ritual carried with it a ripple effect through the pack's intricate network of loyalties. Amid these deliberations, there was an undercurrent of cautious hope. Several elders, more progressive in their thinking, saw the formalization of the bond as a beacon of renewal, a way to modernize the pack's traditions while retaining the core values that had sustained them for generations. "Let us craft a ceremony that not only acknowledges this divine mark, but also reaffirms our commitment to unity and strength," proposed one elder, his voice imbued with quiet conviction. "By celebrating the bond between Isidora and Darius, we can demonstrate that our ways are not stagnant, but are capable of evolving with the times. This will strengthen our alliances and inspire confidence both among our own ranks and in the eyes of our neighbors." His forward-looking language stirred curiosity about the potential for a future where the pack's leadership might be reimagined, one that blended tradition with innovation. As the conversation unfolded, the elders meticulously examined every facet of the new ritual. They discussed the symbolic elements that could be incorporated. A reimagined version of the ancient rites, a ceremonial marking that would echo the luminous silver pattern now etched on Isidora's skin, and a series of vows that would bind the couple not only in matrimony but in the mutual responsibilities of leadership. The elders contemplated the role of each participant in the ceremony, considering how the public acknowledgement of this unexpected union might reshape existing alliances and set a precedent for future generations. The discussion was both pragmatic and visionary, a blend of political strategy and heartfelt reflection. At the heart of their dialogue was the recognition that this formal acceptance ceremony would serve as a transformative moment for the Silver Dawn Pack. The new ritual was not simply about validating a divine sign. It was about reasserting the pack's unity and adaptability in the face of change. It promised to be a declaration that leadership, while rooted in venerable tradition, could also embrace the unpredictable twists of fate. This was a chance to signal to all who observed, from loyal members to skeptical outsiders, that the pack was evolving, that it was prepared to meet future challenges with resilience and ingenuity. As the meeting drew to a close, Elder Jonas summarized their deliberations with a measured finality. "We stand at the crossroads of destiny, Let us craft a ceremony that honors our ancient customs and yet boldly embraces the future. A future where the union of Isidora and Darius becomes a testament to our adaptability, our unity, and our unwavering commitment to the strength of the Silver Dawn Pack. His words resonated deeply, leaving the elders with a shared sense of purpose and a cautious optimism that, despite the uncertainties, change was not. In that quiet chamber, as the candlelight flickered and the echoes of their words slowly faded, a new vision began to take shape. A vision of a pack reborn, one where traditions could be redefined and the bonds of fate, however unexpected, could pave the way for a future of shared destiny and renewed strength. Later that evening, as the pack's tumult faded into a quiet murmur and the formal ceremonies gave way to solitude, Isidora found herself alone in a small chamber, its walls softly illuminated by flickering candlelight. In that gentle, private sanctuary, she allowed herself to reflect on the journey that had brought her here. A journey from the shadows of obscurity to the uncertain dawn of leadership. For years, Isidora had lived in the background, her presence barely acknowledged in the glow of her illustrious sister's brilliance. She had always been the quiet observer, content to let the world revolve around others. But the events of the past days, the unexpected bond, the fierce duel, the tumultuous aftermath, had carved a new path into her heart. As she sat quietly, her thoughts began to unravel like an ancient scroll, revealing secrets she had long kept hidden. Every memory, every unspoken regret, mingled with the hopes of a future that was, for the first time, entirely her own. Her eyes wandered over the faint, luminous mark on her wrist, a delicate silver signature of destiny that now defined her. It was a symbol of a fate that she had never chosen, yet one that she was beginning to understand was hers to embrace. In the soft glow of the candle, the mark seemed to pulse in time with her own heartbeat, a constant reminder of the connection that now bound her to Darius and the pack. This connection, though heavy with responsibility, also offered a glimmer of hope, a chance to carve out a destiny that was uniquely hers. Isidora closed her eyes and recalled the duel, the sound of clashing wood, the taste of sweat and adrenaline, the feeling of each calculated maneuver, the memory of that decisive moment, when she tapped into a reservoir of primal strength and defied expectations, still stirred within her. It was a moment of raw, unyielding defiance, a moment that had transformed her from a reluctant observer into a warrior poised to take control of her own future. The taste of triumph was bittersweet, laced with the realization that every victory came at a cost. She had sacrificed years of self-doubt and the comfort of anonymity to step into the light, and in doing so, she had challenged the very fabric of tradition. Yet, as she reflected, a deep sense of gratitude began to replace her lingering doubts. The struggles she had endured, the long hours of solitary training, the relentless whispers of inadequacy, the piercing glances that once made her feel small, had forged within her a quiet resilience. She recognized that true strength was not measured solely by physical might, but by the courage to face one's inner demons and to rise above them. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night filled with uncertainty, had contributed to this inner transformation. It was a metamorphosis that had taken root slowly, like a tender sprout pushing through the soil, and now promised the possibility of a future that was entirely her own. In that intimate stillness, Isidora also allowed herself to dwell on her connection with Darius, a connection that had blossomed amidst conflict and uncertainty. His steady presence, his willingness to see beyond tradition, had offered her a rare glimpse of genuine partnership. Though their paths had been fraught with tension and their roles defined by ancient decrees, in Darius she saw a kindred spirit, a leader who, too, was caught between duty and desire, tradition and transformation. This shared understanding stirred something deep within her, a longing not just for personal validation, but for a future where their destinies might intertwine to create something greater than either could achieve alone. Her thoughts turned to the personal sacrifices she had made. Sacrifices that, though painful, had become the bedrock of her newfound resolve. There were moments of quiet despair when the burden of expectations felt too heavy to bear, when the very idea of stepping out of the shadows seemed overwhelming. But with each passing day, she had learned that embracing her fate did not mean losing herself. Rather, it meant discovering the depth of her own strength. The journey was as much about letting go of old doubts. As the candle's flame danced on, casting gentle shadows that seemed to whisper of the past and future alike, Isidora vowed silently to forge ahead. She would honor the bond that destiny had imposed upon her, not as a shackle, but as a beacon, guiding her toward the leader she was meant to become. In that reflective moment, she felt both the weight of her sacrifices and the invigorating spark of hope, a spark that promised that every tear shed, every trial endured was leading her toward a destiny that was uniquely her own. With a deep, resolute breath, Isidora opened her eyes to the dim light of the chamber. In that soft, introspective glow, she saw not the timid girl she once was, but the determined soul of a future leader, a woman ready to embrace her fate with all its bittersweet costs, and to step boldly into the uncertain, yet hopeful dawn of her own making. Under the soft glow of a silvery moon, the balcony of the pack house became a sanctuary away from the relentless demands of leadership and legacy. Here, in the quiet of the night, Isidora and Darius found themselves side by side, their breaths mingling in the cool air as the world below hushed into a gentle lull. The moonlight spilled over them in delicate streams, casting ethereal patterns on their faces and illuminating the tender, wordless connection that had grown between them. In that moment, time seemed to slow. The distant calls of nocturnal creatures, the soft rustling of leaves stirred by a tender breeze, and the rhythmic pulse of their own heartbeats merged into a singular, tranquil symphony. It was as if the very essence of the moon goddess was present, her ancient light, a silent witness to the promise of unity unfolding on this quiet balcony. The moon, with its serene and unchanging glow, became a symbol of renewal, a celestial reminder that even in the midst of chaos and rivalry, there existed a steady, unyielding source of hope. Darius stood close, his usual stoic demeanor softened by vulnerability in the gentle light. His eyes, deep and reflective, traced the curve of Isidora's face, as though seeking to understand every unspoken word carried in her gaze. There was no need for formal declarations. In the quiet intimacy of the moonlit night, every shared glance and subtle gesture spoke volumes. His hand, still warm from the fervor of the duel and the weight of his responsibilities, rested lightly on hers, a gesture of solidarity and acceptance that transcended the rigid boundaries of tradition. Isidora's heart swelled with a myriad of emotions. In that silent communion, she felt both the lingering scars of past neglect and the soft glow of newfound strength. Every soft whisper of the wind seemed to echo the gentle murmur of the moon goddess herself, a comforting reminder that destiny, though unpredictable, had chosen a path that now intertwined their lives. The gentle rustle of leaves around them, like the soft sighs of ancient spirits, lent an almost sacred cadence to the night, as if nature itself had joined in the celebration of their fragile unity. The balcony's view offered a panoramic glimpse of the pack's domain, a vast expanse of rolling hills and ancient forests bathed in moonlight. In that expansive silence, the weight of their shared future felt both immense and oddly liberating. Darius's gaze, steady and thoughtful, met Isidora's, and in that exchange, there was a silent promise. It was a promise to confront the challenges, ahead with a unified spirit, to blend the strength of old traditions with the boldness of a new vision for the pack. Yet, even as the promise of unity shimmered in the quiet space between them, Shadows of past rivalries and entrenched customs lingered at the edges of their consciousness. For a long moment, they simply stood there, eyes locked in a mutual understanding that was both tender and potent. In the stillness, the heartbeat of the night, steady, insistent, and full of life, mirrored the quiet determination that now defined them both. Darius's soft gaze carried a question, an unspoken inquiry into whether the fragile bond that had sparked amidst the trials of combat and political upheaval could withstand the lingering echoes of rivalry and the immutable weight of tradition. Is it possible, he wondered silently, for two souls so deeply marked by fate and duty to carve out a future together, one where unity could triumph over the discord of the past? Isidora, too, felt the tug of that uncertainty. Beneath the surface of her composed expression, a tempest of emotions roiled, hope intertwined with apprehension, passion tempered by the sorrow of sacrifices made. The luminous mark on her hand, a constant reminder of the divine decree that had altered her destiny, pulsed softly in the moonlight. It was a symbol of both her triumph and her burden, a constant echo of a fate that was as much a source of strength. In the silence of the moonlit balcony, as they shared that intimate space away from prying eyes and the clamor of the pack, both Darius and Isidora were acutely aware that their newfound bond was but the first step in a long, arduous journey. Their hearts spoke in a language older than words, a quiet pledge that they would face the challenges of an uncertain future together. Yet, the question that hovered like a delicate wisp in the night remained. Could this fragile unity, born of defiance and destiny, ultimately overcome the entrenched shadows of rivalry and the immutable traditions of the Silver Dawn Pack? As the night deepened and the stars traced their ancient paths across the sky, their silent exchange left them with a promise of unity, of shared strength, and of a future where love and loyalty might rewrite the long-held dictates of fate. In that tender, wordless moment, under the gentle gaze of the moon, the seed of a new beginning was planted, leaving the question to echo softly in the cool night air, inviting both hope and reflection for what was yet to come. In the soft glow of a new dawn, the Silver Dawn Pack stood witness to a transformation that went far beyond the spectacle of a duel. The journey, marked by trials, fierce conflict, and ultimately an acceptance of an unexpected destiny, had reshaped not only the lives of those involved, but the very fabric of the pack's future. As the first rays of the morning sun kissed the ancient battlements of the pack house, the echoes of the past mingled with the promise of tomorrow. Isidora, once relegated to the quiet background, had risen as a symbol of resilience and determination. Every challenge she had faced, from the searing pressure of family expectations to the unforgiving clash with her sister, Lysandra, had contributed to a metamorphosis that was as profound as it was unforeseen. The luminous mate mark, etched on her skin by a divine decree, had come to represent both a burden and a beacon. It was a testament to a fate not chosen but imposed, a fate that she, with trembling courage, had embraced and transformed into her own source of strength. Darius, the stalwart alpha with an imposing presence and a guarded heart, had discovered in Isidora a kindred spirit. Their journey together, forged in the fires of combat and sealed by moments of tender understanding, hinted at a new alliance that transcended rigid traditions. In his quiet acknowledgement of her prowess and his willingness to explore a future, shaped by mutual respect, Darius had shown that even the most entrenched legacies could yield to the transformative power of a genuine bond. Their shared moments, be it on the battlefield, in whispered confidences among the pack's elders, or in the silent intimacy of a moonlit balcony, had slowly paved the way for a future where duty and desire might coexist. Yet, the road to this new dawn had not been without its cost. The pack itself had felt the tremors of change, as old loyalties were questioned and new alliances took root. Family members and loyal followers alike had been forced to confront the painful reality that traditions, no matter how revered, were not immune to the unpredictable currents of fate. The heated debates among the elders, the hushed whispers of dissent and hope among the ranks, and the raw, unfiltered emotions that emerged in the wake of the duel were all reminders that transformation is rarely simple or free of sacrifice. Embracing her destiny, Isidora had not only defied the expectations placed upon her by fate and family, but had also become a catalyst for broader change within the pack. Her ascent from a forgotten shadow to a determined leader embodied the essence of strength and resilience, the same qualities that had sustained the pack through countless challenges. As she looked toward the future, she carried with her not only the scars of the past, but also a burgeoning hope that this unexpected union might herald a new era for the Silver Dawn pack. The journey of these intertwined souls, of Isidora and Darius, of tradition and innovation, was a vivid reminder that fate, though often inscrutable and relentless, held the power to transform even the most unyielding circumstances. Their story was a testament to the idea that strength is not solely measured by physical prowess or adherence to old ways, but by the courage to evolve, to embrace the unpredictable, and to forge bonds that defy expectation. In this crucible of conflict and sacrifice, the very notion of destiny was redefined. As the sun rose higher, casting long, hopeful shadows on the battlements, the Silver Dawn pack began to stir with the quiet hum of a future in flux. The legacy of the past, steeped in ancient rites and rigid hierarchies, was being rewritten in the hearts of those willing to challenge the status quo. Yet, even as reconciliation began to take hold and tentative alliances formed, an enduring question lingered in the crisp morning air. Can the transformative power of an unexpected bond, born of defiance and tempered by sacrifice, truly overcome the lingering shadows of rivalry and tradition? This question, as potent as it was unanswerable, invites us to ponder the delicate balance between the past and the future, between the forces that bind us and the courage to break free. In embracing fate and welcoming the promise of a new dawn, the Silver Dawn pack has taken its first step into uncharted territory, a journey that will continue to evolve, challenge, and inspire for generations to come.